There was really only one artist whom already his contemporaries called Il Divino, the godlike, and this man hasn't lost much of the status to this day. Millions still make their pilgrimage to Italy in their search for Michelangelo. What most of them don't know, however, is that there was another man who was given the same title, someone whom Michelangelo very likely met, the lute player Francesco da Milano. And while the Sistine Chapel's frescoes still shine for all the world to see, centuries after their creator's death, Francesco's music rang out with the last string he touched, and so many who come to Rome or Florence on their pilgrimage for the divine ironically have never even heard his name. There is a number of his works, however, that have come down to us in written form. But how to actually play those pieces and recreate the playing style for which he was likened to Michelangelo is mostly left to our imagination. So one way that I've been trying to better understand his music is by looking for a kind of synesthetical connection between the art that has been preserved and the music that needs to be brought back to life. It was only 1 or 2 years after Michelangelo completed the Sistine Chapel's ceiling that Francesco entered the service of Pope Leo X at age 16. The sound of this place must have been quite something, as the Pope entertained one of the finest choirs one could imagine for his Sistine Chapel, and many celebrated musicians not only sang there, but also left their compositions in the enormous choir books preserved in the Vatican's library to this day. Francesco da Milano knew this sound very well, but while looking at those enormous frescoes and listening to the voices filling the space certainly goes hand in hand, we have to look for our synesthetical connection elsewhere, as it wasn't the Sistine Chapel itself where Francesco played, but much rather the private chambers of his patron. Michelangelo understood himself mostly as a sculptor, not so much as a painter, and actually more as a draftsman than that. He believed that a true master's hand revealed itself not in huge colorful paintings, but already with a few strokes of the pen. Likewise, his sketches and studies, in spite of their small scale and unfinished nature, have been kept like relics already during his lifetime. Giovanni Palestrina, a composer who entered the Pope's service some 40 years later, responded to one of his clients inquiring about the delivery date for a vocal piece, that he had already finished it on the lute and only needed to arrange it for the singers. Sort of like a painter stating that he had all his drawings done and only needed to transfer them to the wall. The sketches already contained the work's essence, and unlike the fresco, it actually allowed the viewer to enjoy it on a more personal, hands-on level, just as Pope Leo apparently preferred listening to the lute during his private time, though the playing he heard still contained the essence of what was sung during ceremony. even though it was mostly in order to better understand Francesco da Milano's music that I had a closer look at those drawings again, I found that looking at Michelangelo's work through this music allowed me to see it with new eyes. I mean, I always appreciated him. It's just that sometimes I found it somewhat tiring that all he seemingly was interested in showing were muscular arms and legs and torsos in different arrangements. This changed also as I remembered some of the comments that Leonardo da Vinci, someone who lived roughly at the same time as Michelangelo or Francesco da Milano, made about music and how it is related to art. Something I presented some weeks ago in episode 2 of my show Memo. If you'd like to have a look at that and more, there is now a brand new website I created just for this show where you can easily find all the episodes I made so far. You can find it under musicamemo.com. And if you'd like to stay informed about upcoming videos, there is now also a newsletter you can subscribe to by simply entering your email address right here. This way I can just send you a message whenever I finish another episode. And if you enjoy what I do and would like to support me, please consider telling your friends about this show. You could send them an email, give them a phone call, maybe a postcard. You know what, just go pay them a visit for a good hot cup of coffee and just tell them about this young man talking about music and art at the lute, and that he has a website that is called musicamemo.com, and then perhaps enjoy some delicious cherry pie. You know, just have a good time. Oh, and if you happen to have a question or a comment, you can now also just leave it right on my website, and I'll try to answer it in an upcoming episode. As a response to episode number 9, Andreas Düker asks, is there a missing link between the Pietrobono tradition and the first published lute books? The search for that missing link is a whole field of study in itself. Having no written traces of what Pietrobono played exactly makes it very hard to imagine what his playing sounded like, even though we have a lot of music from the people who surrounded him. But I think it's wise to remember how idiomatic lute playing has been throughout history. If we compare Francesco da Milano to Palestrina or Kapsberger to Monteverdi, for example, it becomes clear that those lutenists spoke the musical language that surrounded them. Still, if we had no written trace of Silvius Weiss, for example, it would be almost impossible to recreate his exact composing style only knowing Bach and Telemann, even though the musical language was similar. Going back to the descriptions by Johannes Tinctoris, we find a very concrete detail reflected in Spinacino's books, however. Tinctoris writes that Pietrobono would play with a second lutenist, a so-called tenorista, who played the lower parts of a polyphonic composition, so he could improvise a treble part over it. And we find several examples of exactly that kind of thing in Spinacino's books. There are multiple reasons, however, why I can't really believe that those pieces fully represent what Pietrobono's improvisations could have sounded like, but they contain some beautiful moments, and actually they would merit a future episode to be made about them. In fact, two of the best plectrum lutenists I know are preparing a CD about late 15th century lute playing right now, which will also include renditions of those exact duos, but played with plectra. One of the musicians is Marc Levon, who has done a great deal of important research on those missing links you mentioned, and the other, Paul Kiefer, whom I met during my studies and consider a very good player. If you'd like to find out more, I included links to their respective websites in the description of this video. Gaurav Sharma asks, can you create MP3 format files for your music so that I can enjoy this while traveling on my phone? Sure, on my website I added a page where you can download a folder containing the music from all past episodes in MP3 format. So I hope you'll enjoy listening on the road, and I look forward to seeing the rest of you next Friday for another installment of Memo.